Hey there, this is R A Manard, Monks of the Way, Mitrava, and this is October 16. I'm going to cover two different sutta today, but they are not that long. I'm going to give it a couple of minutes for people that would like to show up to go ahead and show up. And I hope that you can hear me. Can you hear me out there? Sometimes I have issues with the microphone. All right, so hopefully you can hear me out there as we go ahead and get into this. And I will just make a quick check that people can hear me. Okay, great. So what we've got today is two different sutta. Sutta, which means they're Pali Canon. Once again, there is some crossover in the Nikaya, I believe, that there's some in Sanskrit also, but there's no complete Sanskrit work, and there is everything complete in the Pali Canon. So that completes this. That means it's a sutta instead of a sutra. So two different sutta today. There's the Treasured Sister and the Discourse on the Sequential Nature of the Truth. And they sound like they would really be something lengthy, but they're not. So I'm thankful for that. I did translate these myself, or retranslate. People get pretty upset when your translation is not exactly what they expect, and so I've had a lot of kickback from just a few people saying, "Oh my gosh, I don't think you translated that," but yeah, I did. It was exhaustive work. I had to check those words against what the best translators today are saying about the meanings of those words, where they come from, how they're used in classical Indian literature. So yeah, I did work for it. These are not just thrown together and fantasized into something I would like them to be. It's the best rendering I can make of what those words really mean. So here we go. First of all, the Treasured Sister. You may notice in this translation that I do not keep saying female monk, because there's no point in saying female monk. A monk is a monk. That's one of the things that I did that some people are not too happy about, but most people think it's pretty reasonable. So the Treasured Sister. At Savatthi early in the morning, Vajira the monk put on her robes, and taking her bowl and outer robe, went to Savatthi to go about the practice of hearing truth and accepting alms. When she had gone to Savatthi, returning from making her rounds, and she ate her meal, went to the Grove of the Blind to spend the rest of the day. Having gone deep into the Grove of the Blind, she sat down at the foot of a tree for the day's meditation. Then Mara, the evil one, wanting to arouse fear, goosebumps, and terror in her, wanting to make her concentration fail, approached her and spoke a stanza, a saying. By whom was this living being created? Where is the living being's maker? Where has the living being originated? Where does the living being cease? Then she thought, now, who is saying this in a stanza form like this? Is this a human being or a non-human one? Then she realizes this is Mara the Evil One, saying this stanza, wanting to arouse fear, goosebumps, terror in me, wanting to make my concentration fail. Then, having understood that it was Mara the Evil One, she replied a stanza back. Do you decide that there is a self? Do you take a position? This is purely a pile of fabrications, a practice of delusion. Here, no self can be pinned down. Just like a group of parts that we call the word chariot, when all the right parts are present, there is what we call a living being. And we only know what suffering arises, what remains, and what falls away. We only know suffering arises, we only know suffering will cease. Well, then Mara the Evil One, sad and dejected at realizing, Vajira the monk knows me, vanished right there and then. So you see, it's not a very long one, but it's full of a lot, really. So she obviously didn't make this stanza up. It was obviously something that Buddha had put out to answer to these things. And this is the only particular sutta that I know of where a woman tangles with the evil one. And what it says here is that there are these particular interests that people like to debate, and there's really nothing to debate. And so these things shouldn't be a bother to you. You should have already be done with them. By whom was this living being created? Now, how are you going to answer that? How are you going to debate this? You're not. You're going to spin your wheels. People are going to bump their heads. Nothing's going to happen. Where is this living being's maker? Where has the living being originated? Where does the living being cease? These are things that people like to debate. But what they come up with is a pile of fabrications every time. And that's what this is saying to you. That you should be wise in the debate you undertake. And I'm not saying as a mindful person, as an aware person that's trying to practice truth, that you shouldn't go ahead and have some ridiculous conversation. A little ridiculous conversation is okay. You know, we're not talking about a strict code of only talk about stuff if it's deadly serious, important, you know. Some people like apples, some people like oranges. You could talk about, you know, which one is better. You could engage in ridiculous conversation, even like this, but not a serious debate, really, you know. This should be nothing that, as they say, makes you butthurt. You should not be upset about this. Get excited about these kinds of debates. They're ridiculous. They go nowhere. No one wins. But there are good debates to have, and we're getting to that one. Let's see here. We've got, there we go. It's the Discourse on the Sequential Nature of the Truth. And it's, notice how well, maybe you won't notice how I translate that. It's Dhamma Niyama Sutta. So Sutta would mean discourse on. And then Dhamma, of course, is the truth. That Niyama is a big word. It means a lot in a little package, I'm telling you. And the only way to really translate this truthfully is what I've got here, the Discourse on the Sequential Nature of the Truth. And that goes this way. Let me get a drink real quick, a little dry. Okay, it goes, I've heard that at one time the bald-shaven monk, the Blessed One, was staying in Savatthi at Jetta's Grove. Here's a word, Anathapadikas Park. There he addressed the monks, saying, "Monks." "Yes, Lord Buddha," the monks replied to him. The Blessed One said, whether or not there is the arising of one who has gone beyond, this property stands. This timelessness of truth that follow in an order of logical nature of truth. All observed process is temporary. The one who's gone beyond directly awakens to that, breaks through to that, directly awakening and breaking through to that. He declares it, he teaches it. I shouldn't have said he in there. I believe that needs to be fixed. Anyway, all observed process is temporary. The one who goes beyond directly awakens to that, breaks through to that, directly awakening and breaking through to that. He declares it, teaches it, describes it, sets it forth. He reveals it, explains it, and makes it plain. All observed process is temporary, whether or not there is an arising of one who has gone beyond. This property stands. This truth is fixed in the way it directs. This truth always is without exception. All observed process is stressful. The one who has gone beyond directly awakens to that, breaks through to that, directly awakening and breaking through to that. He declares it, he teaches it, describes it, sets it forth, he reveals it, explains it, and makes it plain. All observed process is stressful. Whether or not there is the arising of one who has gone beyond, this property stands. This truth is fixed in the way it directs. This truth always is without exception. All observed phenomena is not self. The one who has gone beyond directly awakens to that, breaks through to that, directly awakening and breaking through to that. He declares it, teaches it, describes it, sets it forth, he reveals it, explains it, and makes it plain. All observed phenomena is not self. That is what the Blessed One said. Respectful and thankful, the monks delighted in his words. So once again, a short one, but it says quite a bit, I think. And in particular, we're seeing three sets of things that he wants to say, in particular, have logical nature of truth to them, and sequential. It's just, this is the way it is, it's set, it directs this way, it's fixed. All observed process is temporary. All observed process is stressful. All observed phenomena is not self. So he's saying you see things that are in process, things that are in motion. He's saying those things are temporary. So in the now, what's happening now is important, but you have to know that if it's process, it's temporary. And it's going to be stressful. Processes are stressful. And when we talk about processes, of course, what we're talking about is change in self. We're talking about transformation. We're talking about that place that the mindful person is, where they dwell, that is open-minded, not being set in stuff, being ready to be wrong about anything and absolutely everything at any time. Not having these set beliefs, you're in process, you're learning, and that's going to make a lot of change for you in those areas of your life, your views, your direction in life, the way you live, what you're doing as you go. And you've probably noticed that already. I mean, if you're past your teenage years, you've got to know that you've got some different directives in the way you want to live and the way you want to get things done and what you think's important. And that's going forward. It's a process. And all observed phenomena are not self. So for an example, observed phenomena, things you do, extension we're talking about, even things that are an extension of you are not necessarily you. Your voice, your body, I mean, we could go on and on. These things are not you, but you do manifest through them. Manifest isn't the right word. Project? No. I'll think of the right word. Anyway, he's saying that there is a process of learning these things too. Inside this, he says this. He awakens to this, he breaks through to that. So he fully intends to tell you that I'm telling you this, and I know you're not really going to get it fully right off. That's the way it is. That even though I tell you, it still has to be broken through to fully understand what I'm saying to you. And a lot of the teachings are that way, where a person reads through it and they're like, yeah, I know what he's getting at, and they move on. And they miss the depth of the teaching. They miss the things they're supposed to catch on to. And there's several of them, and it takes time. It takes time to really get through. I know people have the experience of where they've heard something that seems true. They agree with it, seems reasonable and logical, but it doesn't click. You know something, the time goes to use that knowledge, and it comes and goes, and guess what? It didn't even occur to you. So I think everybody has the experience of not having things click, so they know what I'm talking about here. There is more to this that's going to click for a person than if you've heard this for the first time, you could possibly absorb, that I know of. I won't say nobody could. Anyway, so with these two sutta in mind, or any particular topic, if anybody has any questions about these particular things, or any particular thing from the Buddhist perspective, anything in particular, you could go ahead and ask. I'd be happy to go ahead and talk about that, and I may go ahead and point to a completely different sutta to elaborate on it. You never know. Like I say, in these things, it's not scripted. There's no bullet points. Well, the sutta, I guess you could call a scripted way, but all live, so anything can happen. Let you think on that for a minute. Today we've got the altar there with the Buddha and the candles, and he's wearing meditation beads there today. Each time, if you notice, the altar is a little bit different. So it looks like maybe there's no questions, and maybe we get through this pretty quickly today. But feel free to ask anything you like. I'm happy that you went ahead and attended the service. And of course, I'm available anytime. Hopefully you'll keep coming back to hear these. I'm going to cover a large number of sutta. There's a particular translator who has done some fantastic work in modern translation. We find that many of these sutta have been bent ridiculously even towards the direction of what somebody wanted to believe when they translated it, and it just doesn't have any bearing really to what was said there. One thing that I've seen there said, we are what we think, what we think becomes the world, or something like that. Our thoughts become the world, something like that. But if you look in the Pali, it doesn't say anything about thoughts or the world. And that's, you are what you think, is not a teaching from Buddha. The real translation would be, everything is preceded by mind. Your perception is preceded by mind. So, you'll, according to your mind, you'll change the way you view reality. But, that's not as poetic as the way the guy did it, and certainly not as opinionated. Anyway, we're going to get to those two. I want to thank you for attending today Going to do this every Wednesday forever now. Let's see. I guess I'll mention some more stuff next time. I don't want to make these videos too long. Anyway, this is R A Manard, Mitrava for the way, and may truth remove delusion the way light removes darkness. Thanks once again for attending.